Okay, I guess it's not getting any better then. Let's look at episode 3. Well, actually, before we look at episode 3, the Rings of Power intro, that moving about that looks like it's showing the rings, then it's showing the trees, and then it's just showing. This could be that I haven't looked enough into art around Tolkien and the lore, and I need to, but I can't make out head or tail of it. But even if it is something from Tolkien, the whole situation with it is, it seems like whoever got it into their heads that this was a good intro scene to do, the opening credit scene, it looks like something that they thought, oh, this will be grand, this will be impressive, and actually it makes it feel like it's some kind of school art project. It really just doesn't feel. My guess is that they thought, oh, this will be a bit like the Rings of, sorry, not the Rings, the Game of Thrones intro. We've got the moving stuff, we've got the music, and we're going to have these moments where we go from what's supposed to be, in theory, I suppose, music building up to something impressive. Then you have the serene elements, and then it keeps on going, and it's just. It gives the impression of tried to be Rings of Power, but failed and was crap. That's what it has the impression of to me. It does not strike me as a way of building us up for the Rings of Power, the incredible story that Middle Earth has, and instead it's just crap, really. But anyway, on to the story. So the story of this episode, we start off with I forget Black Elf's name. He's that inconsequential and created. But the captured elf, find out that he's actually not the only captured elf. There's others that are captured as well, and they're captured by the orcs. Now, I don't want to bring race into it at all, but it seems like it's being thrust upon us because the orcs are very clearly a lot lighter in skin colour. I'm sure this is something, particularly when you bear in mind that we have a black elf who is in chains, but I'm sure that this is some race message being thrust upon us here. It's just it's so in your face. It's so in your face. It makes you sick to see something that's as amazing as Tolkien being turned into such a pathetic little thing. And it's not even like they've got the excuse of saying, well, these are the orcs from the north. These are the orcs in the south. They are in the Southlands. The orcs that we see in The Hobbit that are white, the big white orcs of Azog and co, they are clearly a different species within orcs, if we're to take that as being accurate to Tolkien lore. And as far as I'm aware, that's one of the major areas of The Hobbit which many people, myself included, have issues with how Jackson did The Hobbit. But these aren't those, even if we're allowing for that. These are orcs of the south, and they are not the right colour. They should be basically be kind of black, and not black in the way that we see we describe humans as being black, but actual black, like black of my t-shirt black. That's the appearance that the orcs have. So that's the first thing that we see in all of this. And we see the whole thing of what's going on. And it starts... We start basically in this episode, we start to see quite what is going on. We start to see that what they're doing is they're basically creating Mordor. So it's this idea that that Mordor, the geographical area around it, didn't exist until Sauron decided to set the orcs on it, and they would do the tunneling and so on, and then he would raise up the tower. I'm not sure how accurate that is to what Tolkien had intended. I've not read enough about the creation of Mordor to be able to say for definite one way or the other, but this certainly doesn't ring true with what my impression is from all that I have read. And then we get on to Numenor. Now, this is where the ridiculous butchery of the timeline starts to show its face in all its forms. So first off, we're in a setting where we see at the start in episode 1 that it's the first point at which they're saying they're happy, they're free of the taint of Morgoth and the orcs and so on, and Galadriel's been going around hunting around for signs of Sauron, and that gives you the impression we're early on, that we're early in the era of the Second Age. Elrond is still very low within the rankings of things, which, even if we were to accept that, which we shouldn't, given that he is the son of Eärendil, who is the saviour of the elves and the Edain, even if we accept that, despite the fact that he is descended from Thingol, he's descended from Melian, he is descended from the High Kings of the Noldor. Even if we were to accept this, we've got this whole issue of, we know, because the appendices of The Lord of the Rings are not something that is set apart from anything else, they are part of a grander storyline. We know from within the Silmarillion that Elrond becomes something much, much greater when he sets up the refuge for Eregion of Rivendell, or Imladris. Rivendell becomes the place where the elves of Eregion go to be safe. Now, if Elrond is a lowly elf still, if he's only just in episode 2 gone out to Eregion, we're still very early in his story within the Second Age. And yet, we're now in Numenor, a Numenor which is distrustful of elves, a Numenor which has just had its last elf friend king, Tar Palantir. Now, we'll get on to Tar Palantir in a bit, but as Galadriel goes through Numenor to see the ruler of Numenor, she's looked at with suspicion. We're clearly right towards the end of our time in Numenor before it's torn down as the world is made round rather than being flat as it is at the start of the Second Age. when the Undying Lands are sundered from the rest of Middle-earth. If that's the case, Elrond will already have created Rivendell. He will have already had the last of the Noldor join him there, and will have created his stronghold, his safe hold for those elves in Rivendell. But he's not, because they're completely messed around with the timeline. By the time that Miriel inherits from Tar Palantir, Eregion is well and truly done. The Rings of Power are well and truly done. Indeed, Sauron has created Mordor. He has the ring, because he uses the ring as part of how he creates the Tower of Barad-dûr. And all of the stuff like Celebrimbor dying and so on, that has all happened. That has all happened by the time that Miriel inherits the throne from Tar Palantir. It's just... It beggars belief how they thought this was in any way close to honouring Tolkien and what he wrote. Now, the next thing to think, because my first observation when I saw this was, why on earth are they looking at her with suspicion? Because it didn't make sense, because I was hoping they might have been vaguely trying to play along the lines and they were just going to have the downfall of Númenor happen really, really quickly. Well, no. At least with this, Númenor has been going on a downward spiral in its opinions of the Valar and the elves for some time. So that, at least we can say that's accurate. But we've got the Queen Regent, which is Miriel, and we have Chancellor Pharazôn. Now, just to read from the Silmarillion, because as I said, the appendices, they are not written in a vacuum. They are written as part of the greater legendarium that is Tolkien's writings. Now, we have Tar Palantir becoming king of Númenor when his father dies, and Tar Palantir has has two sons, one of whom is Gimilcad. Gimilcad has a son called Pharazôn. All we know of Pharazôn, the son of Gimilcad, it says when he had become a man, he was more restless and eager for wealth and power than his father. He had fared often abroad as a leader in the wars that the Númenorians made then in the coastlands of Middle-earth, seeking to extend their dominion over men. Thus he had won great renown as a captain both by land and by sea. Therefore, when he came back to Númenor, hearing of his father's death, the hearts of the people were turned to him, for he brought with him great wealth, and for a time free in his giving. So this is the description that we have of Pharazôn. He's not a chancellor. He is a leader of men. He would be the leader of the king's men, the greatest kind of power behind the throne of the people that were against the Valar and the elves. And when he is back, he would be speaking against Tar Palantir. We know that he leads the king's men behind the back of Tar Palantir, while Tar Palantir tries to return Númenor to its ways of being reverent towards the Valar and trying to renew friendship with the elves. And he then goes on to say, "It came to pass that Tar Palantir grew weary of grief and died. He had no son but a daughter, whom he named Miriel in the Elven tongue. And to her now by right and the laws of the Númenóreans came the sceptre. But Pharazôn took her to wife against her will, doing evil in this and evil also in that the laws of Númenor did not permit the marriage, even in the royal house, of those more akin than cousins in the second degree. And when they were wed, he seized the sceptre into his own hand, taking the title Ar-Pharazôn. Okay. What we have there is basically the story is telling us that Tar Palantir dies, Miriel becomes queen, and immediately he steps in and marries her and takes the throne for himself. We don't have a case of a queen regent. She becomes queen, and very quickly after that, he marries her and usurps the throne from her, becoming king. The story that we're being told in The Rings of Power is that she is the queen regent, which we then have, a little bit later, Elendil saying that the king was forced from the throne and he's basically hiding with the faithful. The whole thing around the situation with Tar Palantir is ridiculous. He was never forced from the throne. He died on the throne. As soon as he died, Miriel became queen. Never queen regent. She was queen. And very, very soon after she became queen, she was then forced by her cousin to marry him, and her cousin Pharazôn became Ar-Pharazôn, the king of Númenor. This whole thing in the Silmarillion is very clear as to what the line is that happens. So this whole idea of the Queen Regent and Chancellor Pharazôn is just utter toss. It's absolute rubbish. And it why is it done? It's done so that we have yet another female leader, and she engages with Galadriel, the female leader, who is anything but female in the way that she's doing things. It's a purely identity politics thing. It's purely to have another female leader who is deemed to be a strong and, ironically, masculine leader. So that's Númenor, and within this, we also have the stupidity around three characters within Númenor. We have Galadriel, who is being arrogant beyond belief. She's clearly not in a situation where she is welcomed, because she's seen the looks around, and yet she comes out and she says, "How dare you? I am of the house of..." I forget the description she used, but declaring she's of the house of Finarfin. She's the leader of the armies of the West. She's she is one of the commanders of High King Gil-galad. "Look at me, aren't I impressive? You should be kissing my boots," basically is what she says. You don't say that when you're surrounded by people who distrust you and don't like you, because all they're going to do is they're going to not like you even more. But she doesn't care. It's beyond understanding that someone who learned for centuries under the teaching of Melian how to be a wise ruler, a wise actually to be a wise power behind the throne, because the whole point with her and Celeborn is that Galadriel is the power behind the throne, that Celeborn is the ruler of the Golden Forest. He's the ruler of Lorien, but but Galadriel is the one who advises him, and she advises with the wisdom she gains from Melian, who did the same with Thingol as king of Doriath. So yet more experiences we get of Galadriel being the most unlikable character they have created in the whole of not Lord of the Rings, of Rings of Power so far. I'm sure they could create someone who's far more disliked, far more unlikable, but given that we've got 5 series in total, and Galadriel's going to survive through the entire thing, they're going to be hard pressed to do that. We then have Queen Miriel disliking elves. Queen Miriel was the daughter of someone who was the son of one of the faithful. The whole reason why Tar Palantir becomes Tar Palantir rather than one of the other rebelling kings speaking out against the Valar is because he was raised by his mother, and his mother was one of the faithful. And so as king, he would have raised his daughter to be positive towards the elves and the Valar, and that's the impression we have in all of what Tolkien writes about Miriel, that she would have been a continuation of Tar Palantir, but for the fact that she was usurped by Pharazôn to become Ar-Pharazôn. The second thing is she's named Miriel in the Elven tongue. The whole point of why kings started calling themselves whatever it was because they were declaring themselves to be kings of men. They were changing from using the Elven tongue and starting to use the Aduniac tongue. And if Miriel had been distrustful of elves, she would have changed her name to an Aduniac one, not keeping it as Elvish. So that, again, doesn't make sense. Why is she quite happy to remain with a name that is Elvish, and yet she is distrustful of Galadriel? Even if she's putting this on, I don't know whether it's a case of she's putting it on simply for show because she knows she's surrounded by people who distrust the elves, or whether she will potentially change at some point. Certainly the trailers would suggest that she becomes more amenable to Galadriel as things go on before Galadriel leaves. But even if she's doing it just for show, surely the whole thing should be, okay, I need to change my name because that's the only way that they'll believe that I truly am someone who is like them, who doesn't trust the elves. I have to put my name as being in Aduniac to show that. So that makes no sense. And then Elendil is not a nobody in Tolkien's works, but in Rings of Power, he's an utter waste of space. Effectively, he's the son of the ruler of the city that is the haven of the faithful. He's not just a person who happens to like boats. This is a guy of descent from the king, from one of the early kings when he had a daughter first. Because the law from Númenor was it's the firstborn son who becomes the ruler. The firstborn daughter was married to someone, and the descendants of his daughter were given the title that would then be descended through their line and eventually end up with Elendil's father and then Elendil himself. So why they portray Elendil as a nobody, again, no idea. It continues to be that they thought, oh, that's a name that we like, let's use that, and then just forgetting about it. The other thing that we have to bear in mind is that if we're where they're suggesting that we are in the timeline, then Isildur and Anarion should be in their majority. They should be full-grown men. But what we have are youths. We have effectively kind of 16 to 21-year-olds. I think they're aiming at portraying them somewhere in that, maybe 18 to 21. That kind of bracket. But no, they would have been full-blown men. They fully grown, fully into their majority. They would have had command of ships, quite a ship of their own, quite happily. All this kind of stuff. But no, they're still being portrayed in a way which doesn't flow with how Tolkien created the Dunedain to be. And Elendil would have had, despite the fact that his father would have been alive, because his father is the one that goes to, or tries to go to the Undying Lands to plead for forgiveness for the Dunedain. Elendil would have been someone of power and note within Númenórean society, even if the King's Men and the people of the capital of Númenor would have looked down upon him and said, yeah, we don't care so much. He would have still had some level of respect for the title he had, even if they looked down upon him for his views on things. So that's Númenor and the state it's in. We flick back then to the orcs, and we see the orcs taking issue with the elves because the elves want to dig around a tree rather than uprooting a tree for digging these tunnels or ditches or whatever it is that they're digging as part of this creation of Mordor. And the way that they decide to treat this rebellion by the elves is they decide to offer the elves water to drink, and two of them drink it and no problem, and the third drinks it and he has his throat slit. Now, I will grant you, orcs are cruel. The whole thing that we see with the orcs in Mordor when Sam and Frodo are there is they are cruel slave drivers who they are just as happy to fight each other and eat each other and stab each other in the back as they are to go and fight against humans and elves. And that when they're going off to fight humans and elves, they are whipping, their leaders will be whipping them to make sure they keep on going. There is such a cruelty about them that there is no denying that they are cruel. However, the style of cruelty that is done in this is not in keeping with the cruelty that we would expect to see. Now, they would potentially take one of the elves and brutalise him, maybe even kill him in front of his friends in a brutal way. But they wouldn't play games. This whole thing of here's some water, let two of them have a bit and think that they're okay, and then go and kill the third one. That's just so out of character for the orcs. It really is. It really is a bit ridiculous the way that they do that. I understand why it's being done within the setting of the story. I understand why it's being done from the identity politics side of things, because again, white orcs beating up on the black elf and his friends. The symbolism is clearly there with the chains and everything, but it's just not. I repeat myself again. It's not Tolkien. It's not the orcs that Tolkien created. The orcs remain throughout the entirety of his works on a par to themselves. They are a straight line. They don't go up, they don't go down. The only change that we see within orcs is when Saruman creates his own orcs, and we have the Uruk-hai. But even then, their actions are pretty much the same in how they treat the rest of the world around them. So I don't know why they threw this in. If they were trying to stick to Tolkien, but as I said, there are other reasons why this has been thrown in, and it's pathetic. Then we're back to Numenor again, and we see Galadriel smile for the first time. She's happy riding a horse, and why the hell was it done in slow motion? This slow-mo shots can be used really well in the right setting. Seeing her riding a horse on the beach and it being slow motion and slow motion for so long, it just dragged and it was pointless, and it made absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense at all. We don't know why she's enjoying herself riding horses. There's nothing that's been set up within the Rings of Power so far to say that she was happy riding horses. I believe I'm right in saying that in the actual lore, she would regularly ride around with her cousins, the sons of Feanor. She would quite happily take part in riding around in Valinor. So if that was the setting, it would make sense. But actually, the setting we have at the moment is that right at the very beginning, she was bullied by either her siblings or by her cousins. Bearing in mind that the whole throwing the stone against the paper boat and so on. Of course, we don't know where the paper came from, given that the elves are so fond of trees, but that's beside the point. I probably should have suggested this in my review of episode 1, but anyway. So we've got this pointless slow-mo, and then we have a bit about Halbrand, and there's a whole thing suggesting how he's wanting to make a new start, a fresh start. That his life wasn't great, and he's wanting to make a way for himself. Now, I believe I may have already mentioned this before, but if I haven't, and you're not wanting to know, well, tough. This guy is the guy that turns into Sauron, from what I've heard. Now, if he is Sauron, why is he putting up with everything that he ends up putting up with? Because first he's been looked down upon, been described as a lowman because he's not a Dunedain. And then after all of that, when he steals something, he then gets attacked, physically attacked, and eventually he's arrested and thrown in jail. Now, if he's Sauron, why on earth is he letting this happen? I cannot see any way in which the Sauron that we know from the books would allow this to happen, even if it is to gain something from the people that he's interacting with like this. And if he's not Sauron, if the things that I've heard are incorrect, that he's not Sauron, well, if he's just a lowman, how can he beat 5 Dunedain in a fight? I'm sorry, but that's the equivalent of suggesting that a man can beat 5 elves. Even if it's a Dunedain cannot beat 5 elves in a fight. Elves are better than men. Dunedain are better than non-Dunedain men. So the whole thing of him first trying to make friends in theory, and then we find out it was all so that he could steal something, and then getting caught for it, and then getting in a fight for it. It makes no sense to the character of Sauron. Sauron doesn't do this kind of silliness to get somewhere. He portrays himself as someone of power, of influence, with things that he can give to those that he's seeking to influence. So, if he's Sauron, makes no sense. If he's not Sauron, makes no sense. And then we go back to Galadriel, and she's with Elendil. They've gone to his homelands, and she gets to see the what's left of the connections that the faithful have from the time when elves used to come to Numenor. And within this, we suddenly find out this symbol, the symbol that she's been so obsessed with for so long. It's the symbol for Mordor. It's showing the design of the land, and it's effectively deemed to be a calling card for all that is evil to go to this land, to take it over, and be a part of Sauron's plans. I'm not entirely sure why there'd be a symbol for the land that you're wanting to go to, because given that it looks like the land in maps that exist in Numenor, and given that the elves would have had a much better collection, how the hell didn't the elves already know from the maps that they had that this was to do with the Southlands, later that would be called later be known as Mordor? How did they not know? Just so happens that there's a map that is there on Numenor which shows it much clearer, and all of a sudden it clicks for Galadriel. It's almost as though the entire trip to Numenor was a big MacGuffin just to get Galadriel to understand what's going on. And we also have this chat that she has with Halbrand, of the suggestion that he is a descendant of the kings of the Southlands, and the suggestion that he could potentially be someone that she can work with to fight against Sauron. And again, if he's Sauron, this makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense because, again, this wouldn't be how Sauron would take the Southlands. He wouldn't claim to be someone who has had their land stolen from him. He would be saying that the land is his by right, or he would be looking to get alongside whoever's there to gain influence and eventually take it over, as he does eventually, at least in the books. Don't know yet how it's going to happen in the Rings of Power, but at least in the books, it's how he does it effectively in Numenor. And on top of all of this, another invention. They have to get another woman in. Elendil has a daughter. Now, he doesn't have a daughter. He has two sons, Anarion and Isildur, Isildur being the eldest of the two, and he doesn't have a daughter. But in this, he has a daughter. And of course, she is dismissed by Isildur when she comes to greet Isildur when he comes in from the sea. She's also she's accepted as a member of the Smiths Guild. I forget, but it was one of the creating guilds in Numenor. She's clearly a rising star and will do very well for herself. One interesting thing, I don't know whether it was simply a case of bad acting or whether it was deliberate, but it came across that she was somewhat suspicious of Galadriel. So if it was deliberate, well, that's not too badly done. And given that she exists as a character within the series now, maybe it's a way of pointing towards how families are torn apart by division in things like this. But again, I don't think this is what they're intending. I don't think they're that clever, the writers. So I think this is probably just a little bit of bad acting that does it. And then we get to the Harfoots, who refer to themselves as Harfoots, despite the fact that in all of Tolkien's writings about hobbits, they never refer to themselves as being Harfoots as a race. They refer to themselves as Peredil or as hobbits. Sometimes they'll refer to themselves as small folk, but that's because the three branches, the three families of hobbits are not, despite the fact that there are physical differences, they do not see themselves to be different. And indeed, once they get to the Shire, they then kind of merge together, and one of the three houses tends to be the more prominent in terms of appearance for them. But again, we have more silliness going on. Nori, the young Harfoot who has been chasing around after this Gandalf character, she decides that she's going to be trying to help him to find a map to see what the stars are that he's looking for, and that completely screws things up for her family. But before all this happens, her dad describes her effectively as a Mary Sue. He says she can do anything she sets her mind to. She's perfect in every way. She can do anything she wants. Why do they have to be this good at everything? Why do they have to be this perfect in terms of how we're seeing? Because now all we're seeing is, well, she's amazing and she's screwed up. She's amazing and she screwed up. We never saw that with, for example, Luke Skywalker. He was never amazing and he screwed up. We learned that he was this amazing Jedi savior character as we went through, as he grew and went down his hero's journey. I don't see anywhere within any of this any kind of hero's journey for any of the characters. The best we might hope for would be that Elrond gets some kind of hero's journey where he goes from being a political sap to eventually being the guy that is one of the commanders of the armies of the Last Alliance. That's the best we could hope for at the moment, because at the moment Elrond is pretty pathetic. But yeah, we get a little bit more insight into how Harfoots live their lives, the migration that they do, and how they are quite happy to leave people behind if they can't keep up with the rest of the caravan, and they are looking to almost punish people with the threat of leaving them behind if they can't keep up when they do things that go against the rules. So when it's discovered that Nori has been looking after this Gandalf character, we then find out that whilst they're not going to be kicked out of the caravan, they are punished. They say we're not going to kick Nori out and abandon her and decaravan her. Instead, because she's young, we'll forgive her this because she needs to gain some more common sense. That certainly would seem to be the case in this situation. Well done, writers, for actually realising that she's not entirely with the way that she should be doing things. But all that aside, they then say she'll be with her parents at the back of the caravan. And so we see now that Harfoots are in the same vein as Galadriel when she's pushing on in the snowy weather. Someone in her company falls, and she refuses to stop and let them rest. She says, "No, we must push on." The Harfoots say, "You're going to be at the back." And because her dad's the one with the broken leg or broken ankle from the last episode, where they seem to be almost suggesting that this Gandalf character is potentially connected with Sauron, and it's how his leg got broken. There's almost no chance that they're going to be able to keep up, and therefore they are effectively being decaravaned. This bunch of Harfoots are a bunch of gits. I can't think of any other word for them. Well, any other polite word for even vaguely polite company. And then finally, a final thing to look at. We have the whole fight with the warg, the escaping of one of the elves only for him to get hit by a couple of arrows. Don't know where from. We don't know where these archers come from. We have the warg being killed by a spear, just as it was thought to get this guy that was trying to escape, only for the arrows to then hit him. Why didn't they shoot any of the elves with these arrows before, when there was all the fighting going on, when they wouldn't have killed off the warg, so they'd still have the warg to use? And then rather than killing Arondir, if I'm remembering his name correctly, again, if that's Black Elf's name, it's not because it's something that that sticks in the mind at all. But he is taken to the leader of the orcs in the Southlands, and we have a name. Now, when I first heard it being chanted, it sounded like it was saying Adan. However, if we have a look at the title of this episode, it's Adar. So my guess is that the name of this leader of the orcs is Adar. But it is very close to Adan, and Adan is the singular for the Edain, who are the people who came before the Dunedain. It was they became the Dunedain. So a singular Dunedain is a Dunedain. So part of me wonders, are they trying to suggest there's some kind of connection here, that maybe this is a rogue Númenórean or something like that? Don't know who this character will be. There seems to be a suggestion in terms of the way that he is dressed and his height and so on. They could be suggesting that it's Sauron. I don't think it will be, unless either the information about who Sauron is wrong, or if Halbrand can teleport himself between Númenor and the Southlands at will quite happily. So purely because I don't know who this character is going to be, I am interested to know who it's going to be when it's revealed in the next episode. Not because I think it'll be some amazing revelation, but just because I want to know who this character ends up being, because I'm curious. That's all. So I would say there were a couple of elements which were vaguely interesting in this episode. There were a lot of bits that dragged a hell of a lot. This episode is certainly not good. It's vaguely interesting in a couple of areas, and it continues to be just downright disrespectful to the writings of Tolkien, the story that he has created, the story that is clearly there, not just within the writings that Amazon have the rights for, the appendices, but also within the writings that the appendices are a part of. It's utterly ridiculous that they've dismissed everything else that exists in order to tell the story that they want to tell in a mythos where they're basically trying to pitch it to you as saying, we're a continuation of the films of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. We're a continuation of this story. You should come and watch us if you're a fan of Tolkien. And yet they just could not give a damn about all of the writings that surround it. So there we go. That's episode 3. I don't think there's anything left to say, really. It's more crap. It's more not very good storytelling. It's more butchery of Tolkien, and more bafflement as to how they thought any of this could possibly be deemed to be decent writing. That they have on various occasions tried to claim is them writing the story that Tolkien never wrote. There's a reason Tolkien never wrote this story. It's crap.